So good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us this morning for what I believe will be a fabulous presentation from Dane. Just to introduce Dane, Dane Whitehurst is the Creative Director at Burgo-Pack Limited. As a packaging designer, he has worked with many of the world's biggest brands, including Google, Samsung, Unilever and Sony, plus many, many more to mention, and has helped some of the most innovative startups as well launch new products. Dane is a visiting lecturer at Ravensbourne College and the RCA in London and speaks internationally on the subject of packaging design. He is credited with a host of international patents and design awards, and his work has been featured in galleries all across the world, but including the Design Museum in London. Dane is joined this morning by Jude Pullen, who is a creative technologist and physical prototyping expert. And Jude will put your questions to Dane at the end of the session today. On that note, as per usual, the Q&A box is at the bottom of your screen, so do post as many questions as you'd like. We'll get to as many as we can as soon as Dane's finished. So I'll hand over to Dane. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So hi, and welcome to my talk, Beyond Beige, Packaging That's Jaw-Dropping and Ethical. My name, as Nikki kindly mentioned, is Dane Whitehurst, and I'm the Creative Director at Burgo-Pack. And ever since I can remember, I've really enjoyed working with, prototyping in, and even occasionally wearing cardboard. Burgo-Pack itself is a fairly small company of just under 30, and we design and produce really nice packaging. I just want to point out before I begin that I'm not positioning myself as some kind of oracle on sustainable packaging. And as a company, we maybe aren't leaders in the field. We don't even really market sustainable design as our core focus. We're just a small company that's trying to build environmental awareness and good practices into our business. And here's the thing, I don't think that designing sustainably should be special. It shouldn't be viewed as a feature or accolade. It should just be normal, a part of the process and the status quo. And I truly believe that we are moving closer and closer to a time where sustainability is considered synonymous with good design. And I think the design community have kind of thought this for quite some time. But the big difference now is that I believe it's filtering down to consumers, and particularly the young, and it's beginning to affect their purchasing decisions. And brands are beginning to take note and initiate positive change. Even in the last year, it's become a much bigger focus in the meetings that I've had, and it feels like momentum is building. When we think about packaging, I think most people generally consider it in three ways. Firstly, that it helps to get stuff from A to B. It provides protection, security, and better shelf life to our products. The second is that it convinces people to buy those things. And this is particularly true of retail packaging that has to work hard to close that all-important 3-foot gap before slamming people with features and benefits. And finally, it helps to craft a strong brand experience, a recognizable and powerful identity that embeds in people's subconscious and calls them back for more. And it's this third one that I'd like to talk about first, because it's what we spend a lot of time on. Brand experience, from our perspective, is much more than skin deep. It's not just about what gets printed on the outside. I myself have a love-hate relationship with Apple packaging. I hate it because I can't count the number of times that I've been asked to recreate it for other people. And sometimes it's just not appropriate. But I love it because it's helped to build an appreciation of the work that myself and my team do, and of the potential and value of good packaging design. And not just in terms of what's printed on the box, but in things like the way that the lid slides off and the way that everything is neatly ordered and presented. It's about the experience of the box as an object, as a piece of industrial design. And it's not just aesthetic. I've worked on projects where packaging design and the relationship between the box and its contents have actually helped to define the design of the product itself. One example was an agency that were designing a device that had a lightning port that sat proud of the device. And we were able to sort of illustrate the effect on the complexity of the packaging to protect it which then began a conversation about its vulnerability in the real world, and the design was eventually changed. And it was caught early because the packaging was considered early. And I think that's a really important point. I also love Apple packaging because I believe that it helped in some ways to kickstart the world's obsession with the unboxing video. So even for me, the obsession seems slightly bizarre, but believe it or not, people care about the way packaging makes them feel. If you Google unboxing video right now, you'll get over 100 million hits. People care about this stuff. And brands are seizing on the opportunity to use packaging as a tool to leverage multi-channel marketing campaigns and to infiltrate online communities through its shareability on social media. Packaging in many ways has become the personal billboard for the influencer in us all. And in the hands of the right influencer can achieve incredible visibility. And so in a way, the value of good packaging has transcended its physicality as a way to visualize and experientialize the world of new shiny stuff in the digital world. So we spend a lot of time on the touchy-feely stuff. Our work explores materials, mechanisms, finishes, and other things that intend to elicit what is commonly called the all-important wow factor. On an aesthetic level, packaging design for me is about effectively translating brand values into a three-dimensional experience to wrap around products. And so we invest time in research and design to develop our own products, some of which you can see here. And we also spend time consulting for companies looking to create solutions that focus on user experience, but also have a holistic approach and that take into account things like manufacturability, budget, and logistics. And I'll share some of those examples later. But in short, we have a lot of fun playing around with cardboard. But this is the sad alternative reality of the world that we occupy. Packaging has got a lot of bad press in recent years, and in most cases, rightly so. There are a lot of problems to solve. Plastic packaging is recyclable, but its usage, particularly single-use, is out of control. The difficult truth is that over 90% of the plastic we produce since its invention in the 50s hasn't been recycled. And somewhere on our planet, be it in the oceans or in a hole, there's well over 5 billion tons of the stuff that's still going to be with us for hundreds of years to come. And we continue to produce more than we can deal with. Currently, 1 million plastic bottles are purchased around the world every minute. And if current data is correct, then at least 800,000 of those won't be recycled. The system is broken. Material provenance also needs to be far better regulated. It's really difficult to navigate the ever-changing landscape with news stories and revelations bubbling to the surface that change our very understanding of what is actually environmentally sensitive. Labeling and education around recycling is often inadequate or confusing, so consumers don't engage as much as they should. Again, plastic recycling falls way behind that of paper and metal, and that's also in part due to recycling capabilities varying wildly between different countries, local governments, and their various contractors. So better standards need to be set. But negative press equals greater awareness. Consumers are becoming better informed, especially younger generations, and they're demanding answers. And from my experience, even in the last year, brands are also beginning to ask the right questions and to push harder for better solutions. So something seems to be shifting. And now we need to take collective ownership of the challenge and begin acting on these tough lessons. So I'm going to take a breather for a second, because this is kind of what I had to do. I design packaging. It's not something that I ever considered as my first career choice, but here I am, 14 years later, still really enjoying it. The easy thing maybe for me to do would be to turn my back on the industry, give up, and maybe design stuff that lasts longer. But packaging will still be there. It isn't going anywhere, and we need it. How would we transport our products and protect them from damage without it? How would we guard against tampering and ensure their security? How would we preserve food and other perishables to maximize their shelf life? Jude used a quote from Victor Papignac in his introduction to this series that goes, "There are few professions more harmful than industrial design, but only a few." And while I sort of agree with that, I don't necessarily see industrial design as the root cause. And in fact, for me, it's really the pursuit of making things better, or at least trying to, that defines industrial design. And I think that as a designer, you take on a responsibility to ensure that your work doesn't add to the damage, or at least tries to limit it as much as possible. But then how do we pull these things together? How do we make standout packaging that's also sensitive to the environment? How do we create conditions where neither is compromised? Firstly, as a company, we needed a way to engage with sustainability. We needed to make the environment more than just something that we spoke about around the water cooler. We needed a place for it to live within our organization. So we began by identifying people within the company that were interested, engaged, and motivated to instigate change. And we created a task force. We called our team Bright Green, which helped to make it real. And what it did immediately was to make sustainability ownable, and it made each member accountable to the next. It gave the various challenges momentum. The environment was now jointly our responsibility, our challenge, and also our opportunity. And I would say for any organization, large or small, this is a really great first step. It cost us almost nothing, and from our experience, can be hugely motivating and empowering to the team involved. So we then began to establish a core set of principles and beliefs to define our mission, just like a real brand really, but not really one that we would be marketing or operating commercially under. This was purely an internal exercise, but it made it feel more tangible to the people involved. So from our perspective, we believe that packaging does have a bright future, that responsibility doesn't mean dull, and premium doesn't necessarily mean overpackaged. And we believe with the right approach, you can innovate responsibly. So in other words, there really should be no reason why we can't continue to create nice packaging, but we just need to make sure that we find the best and most environmentally sensitive ways to do it. So we identified 3 pillars in which to initiate tangible action. And the rest of my talk really is going to focus around these 3 areas. The first was within our partnerships and finding the best materials, suppliers, and processes that uphold the best environmental practices, and going beyond the labels and stamps to uncover real stories. The second was in the design of our own products. How could we optimize, reduce, and improve their environmental performance? And finally, in education. Firstly, internally, to ensure we're all sharing the right information, and secondly, in educating our clients and helping them to make the best possible choices. So the first area I want to discuss is materials and partnerships. And it's an important one because what you make your product from perhaps has the single greatest impact. From an environmental perspective, obviously making and using less stuff is better. It's pretty hard to argue with that logic. But what I would say is that choosing the right material in the first place is perhaps even more powerful. But sometimes this can be really difficult, and we've found that you have to dig pretty deep to get the whole story. I think ink's a good example here. So soy inks that have a vegetable base would and still are recommended by many as an eco alternative to traditional water-based inks. On paper, they seem like a good option, and I even recently recommended it in a small book that we self-published. But now there's narratives emerging similar to palm oil with suggestions that some soy plantations may be responsible for large areas of deforestation. And at least one ink manufacturer that we've spoken to couldn't fully account for the origins of their soy products. And without proper regulation, it's very difficult to know what to recommend. I must stress that not all soy inks are necessarily bad, but at the moment, without better regulation or digging very, very hard, it's difficult to say which ones are definitely good. I've also already touched on some of the issues with plastic. And whilst I realize that in some cases it's difficult to find alternatives, there are a growing number of options out there for a vast number of products, some of which I have to say seem like no-brainers. Like putting water in a can. Metal has far better recycling rates. It recycles continuously without degradation. And honestly, do we really need to see water It's clear and it covers 70% of our planet. Or this plastic-free paper-based gift card from Green Gift Cards. It's made of paper sourced from responsibly managed forests and uses laminate made from renewable sources and PEFC certified wood pulp. It uses 95% less carbon to produce than a traditional PVC card, is certified biodegradable and compostable, and is recyclable. It might not yet be ideal for things like credit cards that need to last 3 years or more, but it's perfect for gift, loyalty, and membership cards that are used less regularly and for less time. For me, the wood pulp cellulose plastic alternative is really exciting. It's available as a clear or opaque film, and I've seen it used for things like chocolate, crisp packets, coffee, or as a window patching in cardboard packaging and envelopes. I've even seen a product that's thermoformable for things like food trays and lids. It's a material we ourselves are currently testing for a number of different applications within our own product ranges. And if successful, it will take us a really important step closer to becoming plastic free. But as I say, for our packaging, we've always predominantly used paper-based materials, and you can do some really amazing stuff with it. Some of it's flashing up in the background now. Paperboard has some really great advantages, like relatively low entry costs for tooling and setup, which means minimum order quantities can also remain relatively low, which makes it an excellent choice for startups and new product launches. But equally, it also provides the ability to scale fast without really changing the design, if you do it right in the first place. And at volume, production processes can largely be automated, which also helps to drive down costs. We have clients that launched with a few thousand units and quickly ramped up to hundreds of thousands or even millions of unit orders without changing the packaging. The key, I think, is to understand how to design packaging in the first place for different manufacturing processes and to be able to embed this in the design thinking at the beginning. But this, I'm afraid, is just something that takes time to learn and understand and can't really be conveyed in a short presentation. From an end-of-life perspective, paper is also pretty forgiving. As I say, recycling rates are fairly great. They're around 80% in Europe, maybe a little bit less in the States. But even in the event that it's not recycled, cardboard will degrade over a much shorter time frame than something like plastic. And we are talking, a few months to a few years versus hundreds of years. And I think for designers, it's super important to hope for the best, of course, but also to consider the worst possible outcome and to try and design sympathetically for that outcome. As I say, I really like paperboard, but as a material, how do we make sure that we're using the right stuff? How do we ensure we aren't contributing to deforestation or polluting the environment with the choices that we make? For paper and paperboard, there are generally two main options we could consider. The first is ensuring that virgin material comes from forests that are sustainably managed. And the best way to do that is to check that it's been certified by a recognized body such as the Forestry Stewardship Council or PEFC. The second is by using materials that are made from post-consumer or post-industrial waste. The actual amount of recycled content does vary and is often mixed with virgin pulp, so it's important to also check that it's been certified. Both have different benefits and different limitations, but either is a good place to start. For more detailed information, I'd also highly recommend checking the MSDS or the Materials Safety Data Sheet, which accompanies every product. It's usually downloadable from the manufacturer's website. But these things only really give us part of the picture. And like most things, I think it's really important to dig down into the information behind the information. Cutting down trees obviously has negative connotations. Illegal logging and unsustainable practices have caused widespread deforestation, decimated ecosystems, and wreaked havoc on biodiversity, indigenous communities, and the overall health of our planet. But if done right, trees can be harvested and forests maintained to not only limit damage, but actually improve their overall health. I want to take a moment to talk about one of our partners because I feel that they represent some of the best environmental practices that certainly I've come across, and not just in the paperboard industry, but in every industry. Holman Iggesund were founded in 1685 and have centuries of experience in sustainably managing over 1.3 million hectares of their own forests in Sweden. Wood from their trees predominantly goes into making buildings, furniture, and floors, and the rest goes into making paperboard, with any unsuitable leftovers being recovered to fuel their bio-powered mills. For every tree that's harvested, approximately 4 are planted to replace it, and the company manages the whole process from harvesting seeds in their orchard, planting in excess of 30 million seedlings each year in their nurseries, to replanting through hand planting and allowing the forest to naturally self-seed and scatter. The forests provide not only a renewable and sustainable solution for building materials and paperboard, but act as a huge carbon sink, absorbing over 10% of Sweden's total carbon output, while simultaneously creating oxygen to help the planet breathe. Their mills are run on bioenergy created from the waste from tree harvesting, wood processing, and their integrated sawmills. And also their recovery boiler, which is fueled on the lignin from the chips. They basically remove the lignin, which improves the light fastness and whiteness of their boards, so they don't need to add blue dye or bleaches. Their emissions per ton of paper produced are significantly less than the industry standards the world over, and both of their mills hold a platinum medal from EcoVadis for sustainability, putting them in the top 1% of the 65,000 organizations that they audit. I wanted to shine a light on this, not only because their work is incredible, and really this is just a very brief overview, but I also wanted to kind of show that finding the right partner can unlock some pretty big wins. And sometimes it really can be as simple as finding the right people to work with. With paper-based packaging, you do need to be careful about the finishes and coatings that you specify. Unfortunately, time doesn't allow to run through all of them in great detail, but luckily there's an amazing guide full of design tips for recycling that's been put together by the charity WRAP, or Waste and Resources Action Programme. It'll tell you about how cardboard recycling works and how it doesn't. And it also drills down into specific coatings and finishes and provides useful advice on how best to use or avoid them. It's honestly one of the best resources that I've come across, and you can find a link to it in my cheat sheet. I'd also encourage you to take a look at some of the great and inspirational work that they're doing by visiting their website, which is also included. So beyond using the right materials, there's a bunch of stuff that you can do in the design and manufacture of cardboard packaging to improve its environmental performance. And I think this section is interesting in the broader sense of the definition of sustainability, because design really is a powerful tool in unlocking cost savings and at the same time as improving environmental performance. And at the end of the day, if a solution isn't affordable or it doesn't hit budget, then it really isn't a solution, and certainly not one that's sustainable. Perhaps the most obvious place to start is in the actual size of the box versus the product itself. Retail packaging has a role to play in catching the eye, and some may argue that a big box adds perceived value. But does it really need to be that big? Consumers are wising up, and there are often more interesting ways to add value. Not only that, but how efficiently your design fits on a print sheet can also have a big effect, not only on the cost, but also on the amount of wastage it creates. Paper suppliers and printers often work to specific sheet sizes, B1 and B2 being the most common, and making small adjustments can make a big impact. If you can squeeze a large or more complex box onto a single sheet, you effectively halve your tooling costs and significantly reduce your printing costs. And even for smaller packages, fitting a couple of extra on a sheet can save money, all the while reducing wastage. It's also worth considering whether it makes sense for your package to arrive flat or fully assembled. This is particularly pertinent for larger, deeper boxes. For something like an iPhone, it would probably make sense for the packaging to be produced close to where the product is manufactured. Then it can be fully assembled, loaded with the product before being shipped together. But for something like a pizza box or a piece of e-com packaging, where it may be stored for some time before being loaded with the product, it probably makes sense for the packaging to arrive flat, rather than shipping lots of air around. I think this example that I'm showing now also illustrates the point rather well. The box on the left is some retail packaging we designed for Bowes & Wilkins. It looks great, feels robust, and works well in a retail environment. It's also made down the road from the product and is shipped with the product and peripherals all fully loaded. The packaging on the right is a replacement for recertified headphones. This version would be used when items are returned with damaged or missing original packaging. It's made from corrugated card, and it means that the design can be shipped flat or produced locally, rather than importing large, empty, fully assembled packaging from overseas. For pre-certified products sold exclusively through online channels, the packaging needs to work less hard to leverage a sale. And as a recertified product, the step down in perceived value is acceptable. But the cost saving and environmental improvements attached with this strategy is significant. We've also used this strategy for a number of startups and new product launches where volumes may be lower, and it's generally cheaper to produce this type of packaging, more cost effective to ship and easier to store. The downside, of course, is that it will take time to assemble the other end. So keeping it simple and designing for rapid assembly is crucial. Reducing material usage, design complexity, and manufacturing processes is also another great way to leverage savings, both from an environmental and cost perspective. In fact, it was one of the first things we did with our own range of products when we started our Bright Green initiative. And the result was a range of optimized designs that looked and functioned much the same as our traditional products, but with greater efficiency. And we made some tangible reductions, like 25% less paper, 70% less glue. Plus, we significantly reduced the energy and water consumption by removing a bunch of manufacturing processes. Cheaper product, better for the environment. We also took it a step further, creating another range specifically tailored at leveraging low-cost postage. Postage cost, by the way, is a big deal, but it's often overlooked in the design process. For example, in the US, if you're sending a credit card by USPS that needs to be tracked through the mail, the difference in costs between a tracked letter and a tracked package can be counted in dollars and not cents. And these savings can be used for things like better materials and better design. So these packs themselves were conceived around the concept of essentially giving the humble envelope superpowers. They do cool stuff, but they also offer hidden benefits, like the fact that they're really bendy to slip through automated sorting machines, and that they have an integrated seal and tear strip to save on the need for an additional envelope, leveraging further savings. They're also made from a really lightweight version of Igeson's Invercoat paperboard to keep them super light while ensuring they're made from the most environmentally sensitive materials. Our next big challenge is our continued drive to become plastic-free. As I said, alternative materials can help, and it's a great place to start, but so too can design. A couple of years ago, we developed a paper-based child-resistant package for the legalized cannabis market in the US. It involved a fairly lengthy R&D process through various rounds of testing and development. For context, kids are given about 10 minutes to work together in pairs on the box. They're shown how to open it and are allowed to use any means necessary. And I'm talking biting, chewing, stamping, smashing it into their friend's face. You name it, I've seen it. It's brutal, and what's more, they're incredibly tenacious. But after months of development, we finally got to a design that worked consistently well and passed all the relevant tests, but not without using a small element of plastic, like the button assembly that also doubles as reinforcement to key areas of the tray. So we began exploring alternatives. And we feel like we're pretty close now. We've replaced the plastic buttons with features that utilize the mechanical springiness of the folded card itself. And when pulled hard, they interlock with the sleeve to arrest any movement. Sadly, the global pandemic put a stop to our testing, but we're soon to restart and we're really excited. And so I kind of show those because I hope that in some way that it kind of highlights the momentum that was generated by creating our small internal initiative and building a team of people to engage with the challenges. And also, you know, and how good intentions plus momentum can equal positive change. As I say, we aren't perfect yet, but we created a strategy to get better and we continue to build on it. I hope what I've shared so far has been at least somewhat educational, and it's maybe even provided some level of inspiration. But I wanted to quickly now just kind of share some examples of simple things that I love. Making really nice packaging doesn't need to cost the earth. You don't necessarily need to add more size, material, and complexity to build value. Sometimes it can just be about seeing the potential in what you already have and tweaking it slightly. So here's a few ideas. Make the details count. Charles Eames once famously said, "The details are not the details, they make the design." And it's totally true with packaging. Great packaging doesn't necessarily need to be ultra premium and use luxurious materials and opulent finishes. It doesn't always need innovative mechanics. For me, innovation in packaging is about creating beautiful things from almost nothing. And it's often the little touches, unexpected flourishes that give it the greatest impact. I think the best moments come from tweaking the conventional and injecting some unexpected magic. And, you know, there are maybe ways that we can reuse packaging a second, third, or fourth time to extend its useful life. Brands like Abel and Cole in the UK that deliver veg to your door collect and reuse their boxes, as do Ocado with their carrier bags. And Lush, that really are paving the way in sustainable packaging for cosmetics, collect their plastic packaging in store, clean it, and process it for reuse. Loop have an amazing online store where you can purchase many of your favorite FMCG goods, but in reusable packaging. They drop it to your door and collect the empties. I appreciate that there are additional logistical challenges here, and this strategy really might not work for everyone. But if you can't create a closed loop system, why not think like a kid? And there's, you know, there are ways to encourage secondary use after its job is done. You know, this is a chair that my wife and daughter made from air-filled packing material. They had hours of fun making it, testing it, improving and learning. And it didn't really require any changes to the design of the original product, just some imagination and some sticky tape. Packaging is a great building material. Why not encourage this kind of exploration with ideas and instructions printed on the box, or with a simple QR code on the plastic that takes you to a website full of ideas and inspiration? Who Gives a Crap do this really well with their boxes of toilet rolls. The rolls are wrapped in gorgeous paper. That means you don't feel compelled to hide them away, but it also doubles as a superb craft and play material. This version allows the outside box to transform into a theatre, with the toilet rolls becoming characters for imagination play. We didn't design this one, by the way, but I really like it, and it's provided hours of fun in our household, certainly during lockdown. But from my experience, you know, you get the best engagement with this type of work through kids and families with young children, and it's the play element that I think is really powerful. However, I did also discover earlier this week that it makes an excellent emergency wrapping paper. And I'm sorry about that, Rosie. There are also examples where packaging is not necessarily fun in its second use, but instead genuinely useful. This packaging for Curve's metal card, which consolidates all bank accounts into one card, has a removable floor that allows the old cards it replaces to be stored away safely at home. And I think utility is the key here in order to get better engagement with adults. Packaging also has the potential to become part of the product experience, or even become part of the product itself. This simple design for Technology Will Save Us becomes a useful tray to organize electronic components and store half-finished projects. Some kits even use the box to complete the product. Why not use the inside to tell stories and help with setup? This poetic design by Special Projects for Samsung is a great illustration of the way packaging can help users to get to know and set up new products. Most people don't read instruction manuals, and providing guidance at the moment they first interact with a product ensures they won't miss something important. Even for relatively simple products like bank cards, there's evidence that simple guidance, even a single sentence, signposting the first step, can help to improve activation. But for more complex and perhaps unfamiliar products, it can really help. We've used the principle in a few projects over the years, perhaps my favorite being this one for a product called Little Printer. We use cardboard for everything, from the outer box to the internal product protection, where typically polystyrene or thermoform plastics may be used. It takes some effort to design these things in cardboard, but it does mean that every internal surface is printable, which in this case allowed each and every element to be introduced, along with a very specific setup journey that unfolded through the unboxing. It's a really powerful way of ensuring people have the best first experience with their products. Not only that, but by designing everything in card, it meant we could make the whole thing from 2 standard sheets of paper, and everything was neatly arranged to fit on the print sheet, which not only significantly reduced waste, but also the amount of tooling required. Every part was designed to be shipped and stored flat to save space, and all elements were optimized for rapid assembly. Again, these examples don't necessarily do anything particularly flashy, but they work hard with limited resources. They bring joy to a new product experience and also make themselves useful by getting involved in their setup. We have to be careful about the materials we use and how much we use of them, but it's about being clever with those constraints, maximizing the impact of delightful details and creating elegant canvases for stories telling to unfold. And I hope, in some small way, that I've shown that this is the potential of great packaging design, to add value without costing the earth. Finally, I'd just like to kind of wrap up with the things that we've learned on our journey as a company and as a team. And it really is a journey. We're learning new things all the time. It's about figuring out what to do with that knowledge that's important. Firstly, it's more important and more helpful to view sustainability as an opportunity to improve rather than a barrier to overcome. Know your team and empower engaged individuals to own the challenge. You can work with what you've got. And this is, particularly powerful in small companies with limited resources. Start the conversation and see where it leads. 3, find the right partners and use the right materials to unlock quick wins. Sometimes it really can be that simple. 4, look beyond the badge to uncover the full story. Certifications are really important and a great place to start, but they don't tell you everything. 5, design for the worst case scenario. Not every consumer is going to recycle after use. It's time to stop saying things can be this or can be that. Focus on what's actually happening in the world. 6, capitalize on the fringe benefits of going green. Sustainable design is often just designed better. As a Little Printer, working hard to design out plastic also meant that everything on the inside of the box was printable, so use it. 7, keep an eye on the news. Things can change quickly and so can advice. So keep checking the facts and share the knowledge wherever you can. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dane. That was terrific. Real tour de force of everything from the values and getting started. And I loved your point about you were saying that sometimes you just need to give things a name to make sure that a team sort of has a focal point to keep moving forward. And I think that really is so important. Just to warn you, you're sharing your desktop. That's fine. It's all good.
Am I still sharing it?
No, you're all right. It's all gone now. It's like any true designers, it was just awash with files and mad chaos.
It's a mess in there. It's a mess.
So you look the real deal. So yeah, I hope I might take a couple of questions just from the audience. I think, funnily enough, we've discussed Amazon, although there are other, distributors which have a heavy load of cardboard as well. But one from Jan here of 25% of Amazon products are returned. What steps can be made to ensure higher resale price?
Higher resale price.
So I guess maybe I think maybe just to clarify, I think Jan's maybe sort of addressing the, if you are to return in a sort of circular economy way, how is it that the packaging, maybe it's like the Bowers and Wilkins example, these things of, do you have a sort of show pony for the first purchase, and then do you have a thing which is about the return when people are already comfortable and bought into the brand? Is there maybe a step change in saying, look, I don't need you to give me all the glitz, you can just send me it in a box that's quite pure and simple?
Yeah, I mean, it is one of the big challenges with e-commerce, I think, because you take people further away from the product, right? Like that's a challenge. If you go into a store, you can try on a pair of headphones, or you can, try something on and that it works. I think that is a challenge. And I don't know. I mean, I think we need to find a way to kind of localize maybe more. I think it's not necessarily the packaging, but it's about kind of improving the system. And even things like using electric vehicles and things like that make an impact on how things are shipped around, and the kind of the emissions and the carbon footprint attached with commerce in that way. So I don't know, it's a tough challenge.
How do you feel when you've actually just sort of, I mean, maybe you could say the Bowers and Wilkins is an aesthetic choice, but of course you've worked on the, I forgot what you called it, the CBD project where you've got a safety concern. And I guess the other one is of course the sort of, the plastic vac formed, stuff, which is sort of for security, right? So for example, SD cards are always contained in these like near impenetrable things. And of course, when you're in a shop, those have necessity. And I think actually, to be fair to, some of the progress with Amazon, you've seen them do, no fuss or no frills packaging, where they just get rid of all that and you just get it shipped in very simple forms. Do you feel that when you're around the table, do companies balk at the notion that you're just going to go plain and basic and it does look too beige? Do they worry that it's impinging on their brand sense of quality, and that it's okay when
I actually think the opposite, because I think retail packaging, you have to cram so much on to a box or a can or a bottle, right? You have to tell consumers a lot of information. There's a lot of kind of like leveraging of sale there. But we do a lot of work with card manufacturers, so kind of credit cards and banks and fintechs and things like that. And actually their packaging is beautiful because they can get rid of a lot of that stuff. It's about actually building a canvas for a brand, and you can use really nice materials and limit the amount of information that actually goes on the packaging, and it makes it look nicer. But you're quite right as well. There's kind of different functional challenges with sending stuff through the post. So security changes. It's not about tampering and in the same way as it is in store, and theft and things like that. But there are also sort of security things to consider there. So yeah, it is an interesting one. But again, I think visibility is big, because it means that you don't necessarily need to see the products in the packaging. Packaging has to do less work in store to leverage a sale, and I think you don't need to see stuff when it comes through the post. But it's about, I think some of the work that we do is about like creating an experience that is also like really beautiful in the way that it unveils the product.
Yeah, I wondered, initially sort of it would be tempting to think that maybe with all the sort of digitization of experiences, this would be a sort of threat to your livelihood, as it were, sort of working in the craft of paper. But it feels, if anything, it's doubling down on what is a really exceptional physical experience and interaction. And then everything else, frankly, you can place a QR code and go, look, if you need all this extra stuff, then we don't have to cram it in 0.6 type with layers and layers of pages. You can just click out to it and have at it. So how do you see that moving forward?
Yeah, it's totally true. And it's, it's funny for us because, banks moving to kind of digital first, as an example, you'd think, what really is the value of packaging? But they still have a physical product. The card has become, as an object, almost more important, and the packaging as a physical touch point is kind of a rare opportunity to create some kind of physical interaction with customers. It helps, they can deliver their brand as an experience in a kind of rare physical format. And, that moment where you receive your product for the first time and get welcomed into the fold is like super important and super valuable. And also that moment is very shareable as well. So I kind of mentioned in my talk about, the value of packaging as a kind of marketing tool. And people do, they film and share and, video this stuff, them opening it and experiencing it. And I think, some of the work we do is in building theatre around that. So it looks really exciting and really sort of captivating, and it helps to sort of build buzz. So I think there will always be value there.
I love the word theatre in packaging, actually. And do you think that do you think in some ways it's easier for a new, say, challenger brand to create more theatre? Because essentially, from a design perspective, you have a much more focused, concise brief of what the identity of that brand is. But I'd imagine if you were having to work sort of across a huge portfolio like, say, Unilever, it's actually quite hard, is it, to begin to know where to begin? Or again, do you just focus on the brands and say, what is it that we can do for each of those? How do you start with epic companies?
I think it's part brand, but I think also the kind of target demographic is really important as well, like who you're aiming the packaging and the product and services at. So even in the kind of in the finance space, for example, like what we might create like quite an impactful, possibly theatrical piece of packaging for one card, which is aimed at like Gen Z and kind of younger demographics, because they find that stuff exciting. But that may not be appropriate for a super high-end brand, which is aimed at a kind of at an older demographic, perhaps. That those kind of things just don't resonate, and actually maybe it's more about simplicity and making things feel robust and considered, and using nice materials and things like that. So it's sort of understanding the brand and who it's targeted at, and then sort of, I don't know, almost creating like a little swatch book of things that are kind of appropriate to build into the design process early on.
So I've got a question about how do you sort of break down and make informed choices when you've got things like you mentioned the soy ink being a bit of a like, oh, hang on a minute, we've got to do a 180 here. And then of course you've mentioned trying to use as little glue as possible. But I'm sure, even speaking as an engineer, I know there's times where you go, actually there are always exceptions to the rule. So have you ever come across a sort of an LCA calculator for packaging almost that's just dedicated to the nuance of, should I glue it? Should I staple it? How do you navigate such sort of minutiae effectively?
I mean, I guess there's a couple of things. I think first of all, you've got to make sure that you're using the right materials. So if you use, maybe even a little more than you could get away with, that's 100% necessary. With the Holman Iggesund example, like, that they're coming from somewhere that's producing it in the right way. Okay, so you can be at peace with using that material. Mm-hmm. And then, I think you have to kind of weigh things up, and I think there's only really experience there. It just takes time to understand those things. It's designing packaging is funny because obviously it starts off as a flat sheet of paper and you have to wrap that up in your mind, and often sometimes the other way around as well. So you kind of you know what you want to create three-dimensionally, and it's like figuring out how that happens from a flat piece of paper but is still sort of manufacturable, and you can land it on budget, and not kind of make things super complex. And I think that's part of the thing with packaging, is that it's about trying to do something exceptional with very, very low budgets often. And that kind of helps as a constraint in a way, because it means that you're sort of kept honest. You're naturally looking at ways to dial out cost. And that's often kind of material savings, or, trying to make things as simple as possible. And so I think that's kind of feeds into the whole, to your point, in the question, that it's kind of a natural thing to do anyway within the design process.
Just maybe to sort of build on that point, do you feel that, you mentioned sort of the cost saving? It strikes me as that, when you're dealing with injection molding and a lot of heavy industrial processes, there's usually, dare I say it, a lot of obstacles as to why you can't do it overnight. These are sort of, $100,000, dollar machines that need to be overhauled. Whereas it feels like packaging really does have the opportunity to be quite fleet of foot. And I do wonder, is a lot of your discussion sometimes saying, guys, it's not just good for the planet, it's not just what the consumers want. Believe me, you're going to save money with this. This is really a no-brainer. Does that conversation happen, or is there still pushback? And if so, where do you feel it is?
It's often the first question, in honesty. I mean, that, and it's something that we focus on right at the beginning, because, to my point, in terms of the kind of the true sort of understanding of sustainability, like, if we can't hit a budget, it's not going to get made, and it's not going to get made for very long. And so, it has to do these really important things. It has to work on a commercial level, and it has to fit that model, but it also has to try and have, we always bake, the kind of good intentions, but also like the kind of the experiences we're trying to create in that. But yeah, budget's massive. We talk about that a lot.
Cool. And so I kind of wonder a little bit, like, how do you feel this is going to be one of these things that it takes time for people to get creative with their packaging? I mean, the example that you had of, is it your daughter sitting on a, weird inflatable thing? I guess I'm trying to play devil's advocate and say you and me are probably in an unusual small minority here of people who are A, capable of doing these sorts of things, and B, dare I say, have the time and luxury to be able to invest that with our children. So we're very fortunate in that way. But I wonder, do you see it being a sort of creeping agenda that more brands are trying to infuse, as to you put it, a sense of play in things, not just a sense of guilt in packaging?
Kind of, but also in some ways it's gone the other way, and I'm not sure why. I mean, we had a conversation about cereal boxes, right? Like, what happened to those? I mean, they used to be hugely interactive and way more fun. So I'm not sure what happened there, but you're right. It's difficult to see the potential in something when it's just a plain cardboard box, an Amazon box or something like that. But like that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, why not encourage that? Why not encourage that level of play and interaction? If you can kind of lead into a journey, or just like create some templates, or print something on the box, or have a website of hacks that are just really fun to do, and you give people that guidance, you're going to get better interaction. You're going to kind of capture more people. And I think, yeah, I hope that people capitalize on that more, because it is kind of a wonderful material. I mean, you and I have heaps of fun kind of mucking about with cardboard all of the time, and why not encourage that super early on?
Okay, so it's like buses now. I went from having a couple of questions to now too many now. Excellent, but keep them coming. We will get round to them. So one from Brian. Do we need anything other than plain cardboard boxes with simple printing on the outside? The design should not use adhesive and should easily be returnable in flat form. I buy a lot of frozen foods, which comes from totally printed boxes held together with glue. It takes me some time to flatten it, and I like to be neat with my rubbish, and so I only put it out for collection when significant. I realize that isn't a question, but I guess what he's saying is, a little bit sort of, how can we become more aware as consumers, I guess the thing is there a sort of a movement that you're seeing in the data? And if so, what would you say are some good, not always McKinsey type reports, but where would you say you can point to if you're trying to influence a company and say, hey, come on, there's this evidence. Where's the evidence that this is changing? And it isn't just niche hipster brands, to be cynical about it.
Yeah. I mean, it is a difficult one. I mean, I kind of get the desire to, get rid of glue and everything like that. But also it has to work on a kind of commercial level as well. I mean, gluing stuff together means that it's quick and you can automate it and things like that. So kind of, it's hard to, find alternatives, I guess, in a way, or people certainly would have done it. There's challenges in removing those things in terms of like removing inks and things like that. I mean, you see in the cigarette industry, that's just gone to, plain packaging sort of around the world. Like removing brand is such a big deal, and they fought tooth and hand for it for forever, and I think there's kind of value in it that's hard to remove through sustainability. But I think it's about finding that compromise, finding the right materials and reducing processes as much as possible. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, no, and I think it's, actually this leads me on to a nice thing of you often say that, there is nuance in this, and there is sometimes, things which are unseen by the consumer. Got an interesting point here from Ravindra. Do you see the e-commerce companies are pushing the product manufacturers to replace the tertiary packaging, i.e. shipper boxes, with delivery friendly secondary packaging? Sorry, I think I was reading that badly, but I guess what I'm saying is, do you see your work extending beyond the box to the shipping pallet? Essentially, are you contracted to also master that space in terms of sustainability and journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be welcome. I think it's maybe beginning to happen. I mean, if you look at kind of, I think probably a good example are the Amazon basic products, right? Which are shipped out in their own product boxes. They don't come in something else because obviously that's cost effective and it just makes sense. Why stick it in another box? And I think, it would be difficult for some product manufacturers to have two different SKUs of product, right? One that's specifically for in-store and one that's specifically for e-commerce. But, I think it's moving that way. And, the pandemic's kind of been interesting in that we have been buying lots more stuff online. And it's kind of, the high street, certainly in this country, is shrinking. And so, the future's kind of interesting in terms of what that does to packaging generally. But I think, yeah, if we can kind of find ways to allow products to travel more easily through e-commerce platforms on online sales, and that also work in retail maybe as well, then that's probably the best option.
So maybe while we're on the subject of retail, there's an interesting question here from Jan of how do you feel about supermarkets providing recycling bins as you leave the shop? I mean, I guess within that, you could say you're focusing on a niche, but maybe as Jan implying, you're seeding the awareness and the the intent with the users. Do you think stunts like that help push the agenda forwards?
It's a difficult one. I mean, there's kind of building awareness. I may be missing the value in that. Like as you kind of leave the store, I'm not quite sure. I mean, I think obviously building awareness is important, but engaging with, like real behaviors, I think is the most important thing. Like, how do people recycle? Where do they recycle? And what do they recycle? And let's target our efforts at that. Like, not just kind of creating stuff for the sake of visibility and kind of making us look good, but like genuinely engaging with meaningful, consumer behavior.
No, I think that's a really great point. I've got a nice one here from Matt of might, in quote, sustainable packaging kick the environmental issue down the road. What are the wider LCA considerations for packaging? For example, how might using sustainable materials impact product logistics, weight, size, etc.?
I mean, there's a few things in that question, I guess. I mean, you know, kind of using the right material in the first place, I think is important. Like, design for the worst case scenario. Let's hope that things get recycled, but like, let's assume that they're not going to, and then let's base our designs around that worst case scenario. And then, you know, I think that the rest is design, right? Like, we need to work hard to replace the you know, the materials that we've become very comfortable using with better alternatives. You know, the little printer thing, for example, like, that was tough. Like, that there was a lot of kind of engineering involved in protecting those products, and, you know, not only that, but making the whole thing look nice. But it is achievable. Yeah, and, you know, I think that is the power of design. And you know, weights and sizes and things like that are totally difficult things to overcome, but, you know, it's investing the time and energy in the design process to allow that to happen.
I think that's a great answer, and I can see Nikki's returned, hinting that the time is nigh. But I think that's such a great summary of that. Really, for me, it's so exciting to see packaging basically as this, you know, designerly pursuit that actually, with a limited palette, you can do something really impressive. You can find joy in the small places and meaningful touch points where brands can engage consumers with in different ways. And I think, you know, clearly your presentation is such a testament to sort of multitude of ways of surprising, whilst at the same time, you know, working with the ethics and the reality of business. So thank you so much, Dane. It's really been a great overview, and I should probably stress again that there's almost so much more that we wanted to talk about, and that's why we really did break this out into what is an incredible cheat sheet with great links to follow up with from Dane. So thank you again, Dane, and thank you to the audience.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's been a huge pleasure.
Brilliant, and thank you from us as well, Dane, for today's talk. As really emotive. I think it affects all of us, whether you're a design engineer or more in marketing, you know, of how packaging affects us in our daily life as well as work. But thank you very much, and thank you for the amount of questions that came in today. I think we got through most of them, but again, if you've got any more questions on this or watching it on demand, do post them on the event feed, and we'll get to them whenever we can. Thanks very much for today, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.